Innsmouth, stranger.
Greetings, travellers, and welcome to episode 96 of the Innsmouth Book Club podcast. As you can see, we've brought you directly from the bus to the Innsmouth Picture House because we're going to be delving into a cinematic treat today. I'm one of your hosts, Tim Mendes.
And I'm the other one, Rob Poynton. Yes, today we are watching Nosferatu, as there's a remake in the offing. It's coming out very soon, I think. We thought we'd take a look back at what I think we both agree this is the best horror film ever.
Oh, it's an absolute work of art. It's tremendous, tremendously good. Funnily enough, there was actually another Nosferatu came out last year. But we'll get into that. Yeah, which was a Kickstarter. Because I got really confused for a while because they were both in production at the same time. And I kept looking at bits from one and bits from the other and going, well, that just looks really weird because that doesn't look anything like that. Yeah. Then it all makes sense.
Yes. I did hear there were two being made, but I don't really know much about that other one. But I've seen the trailer for the Robert Egger one.
Yeah.
And I know a few people in the States have seen it, and it's getting good reviews so far. So I'm looking forward to catching that one. But first, we shall take you into the plush depths of the Innsmouth cinema. We'd just like to say thanks for coming today. It's very nice to see you all. And if you'd like to take your seats. That chap at the back, would you like a fisherman's friend there? Because we don't really want a lot of coughing going on.
Oh, God almighty.
Actually, fisherman's friend in Innsmouth, that's a bit of a different meaning, isn't it? So
yeah, don't ever say you'd like to suck on a fisherman's friend in Innsmouth.
Oh, we set the tone already.
It was going to happen.
Yeah. All right, settle down, folks. It's time for Pearl and Scream.
It's festival season, and once again the Esoteric Order of Dagon flings open its doors for our annual concert. So come, join the Innsmouth Choral Society in singing your favourite tunes, such as God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, Shark the Herald Angels Sing, A Whale in a Manger, and Dagon Merrily on High, plus a special performance of Carl Orff's O Fortuna. Great fun for all the family, and you'll all get a complimentary mug of hot, spicy mullet wine. So come on down to the Esoteric Order of Dagon. Fun for all the family, from great-great-grandpa to the squids.
Esoteric Order of Dagon, 105 Marsh Lane, nearly 200 yards from this cinema.
There we are then, Nosferatu, a symphony of horror. That was released in 1922, and of course it was directed by F.W. Murnau. So we're going to talk a little bit about the film and the people involved. And then, as Tim mentioned earlier, there's not just one remake of this, there's quite a few.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at some of the spin-offs as well.
Indeed, yeah. I was actually blown away by some of the randomness that has spun out of this film, because there is a couple of really odd ones, which I'm really looking forward to getting into in a bit.
And the wonder is that it's a bit of a miracle that we can see this film at all, isn't it? We'll get to that later on with Bram Stoker's widow and litigation attempts.
Well, they were actually ordered to be destroyed, weren't they? I think there was all but 7 prints of it were destroyed or something like that, weren't they?
Yeah. And in fact, this is the case with a lot of Murnau's films anyway. A lot of the early ones were lost. He's quite an interesting character. He was a member of Max Reinhardt's acting school, and he served in World War I as an infantry officer, and then he later joined the Flying Corps, and he survived 8 crashes
8.
Yeah, he escaped without serious injury.
8 times. Bloody hell, was he made of rubber or something? He bounced.
Yeah, I guess. At one point he landed in Switzerland and was arrested and was actually detained for the rest of the war. So quite an interesting war career.
Yeah.
He made his directorial debut in 1919 with a film called The Boy in Blue. That was followed by a film called Satanus, or perhaps Satanus. Then there was The Hunchback and the Dancer and The Haunted Castle. All of these are lost. All of his early films are lost. So we can only imagine. We can only imagine what they might have been. But then in 1922 came Nosferatu, which really was his adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which had been published in 1897. So not that long before.
Yeah, it's interesting because the title Nosferatu actually comes from the Latin Nes Feritu, which means the offensive one or the insufferable one.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, I like that. The insufferable one.
I think Dracul is a great name, but Nosferatu has a certain ring to it, doesn't it? A certain menace to it.
Yeah, definitely. That was one thing I liked about the Gary Oldman Bram Stoker's Dracula was that bit with Anthony Hopkins when he's get pissed and he's talking about Lucy and he's going, "She is vampire, Nosferatu."
That's a very, very good impression. So following Nosferatu, he made a number of other films, including The Last Laugh and Faust in 1924. In 1926, he moved to Hollywood and there made a few more films, including in 1927, a film called Sunrise, which has been described as one of the best films ever made. Yeah, I don't know that at all.
No.
It was a silent film, but it was the first movie with a synchronized soundtrack and sound effects on it. So no dialogue, but the music and sound effects were there.
Well, that's cool.
He died in 1931 in California after a car crash. So I guess fate caught up with him in the end.
Yeah. Well, 8, 9, that was his 9th life, wasn't it? There you go.
There you go. Yeah. Oh, and his real name actually was F.W. Plumper, Plump with an E on the end.
That's a great name.
Yeah, but he changed it to Murnau, which is a town near Munich that he lived in for a while.
Nosferatu was put out by the studio by the name of Prana Films, which was a short-lived studio founded in 1921 by Enrico Diekmann and occultist artist Albin Grau, who is a rather interesting chap in his own right. Now, Grau claimed he was inspired to shoot a vampire film by a war experience. In a tale that he told people at the time, during the winter of 1916, a Serbian farmer told him that his father was a vampire and one of the undead.
Wow.
As a lifelong student of the occult and member of Fraternis Saturni, under the magical name of Master Practicus, Grau was able to imbue Nosferatu with hermetic and mystical undertones, which will, I'll be going down that rabbit hole in a little bit.
It's interesting, this period in time, isn't it? Because obviously we've spoken about this with Smith and Lovecraft and everything else. We're in the tail end of Blavatsky and the Golden Dawn and Crowley and all these, especially in Germany, a lot of occult groups being set up as well.
Yeah, they were all over everywhere, weren't they? Now, the film studio, Prana Films, it was named after a theosophical journal, which in turn was named after the Hindu concept of prana. Prana is the Sanskrit word for breath, life force, or vital principle. And it's supposed to permeate reality on all levels, including inanimate objects. So, yeah, again, it's got that very mystical, spiritual thing about it. Now, Prana Films was supposed to produce a series of occult and supernatural films, but Nosferatu was its only movie because of basically all the issues, and it was declared bankrupt to avoid paying copyright infringements.
Yes, and this is where Florence Balcom comes into the story. She's the widow of Bram Stoker. Stoker had died in 1912, and basically all she had to live on were the royalties from Dracula. So she received a letter from Berlin telling her about this film Nosferatu, and she also received a program of the opening night of the film. Now, this wasn't just any old opening night at a cinema. No, the opening night cost more than the movie, some people say.
Really?
It was held at the Berlin Zoological Gardens, and basically it was a masked ball and a huge, extravagant affair.
That's amazing. Oh, that's one of those things that if they ever did invent time travel, I'm going.
Yeah, I imagine there's people in costume and all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff going on, probably wandering around having a look at the lions and tigers and,
Yeah. It'd be like holding Whitby Goth weekend in London Zoo.
There's a thought.
I know,
There's
right?
a thought. Yeah. And on the handbill, at the bottom of the handbill, it said, obviously, Nosferatu, freely adapted from Bram Stoker's Dracula. So that perked her ears up, obviously. And well, a basic demand was A, to be paid copyright, but then B, to have all copies of the film destroyed. So this case went on for a few years. It wasn't settled until July 1925, and it was settled in favour of Florence Balcom, and all the copies were ordered destroyed. However, obviously some survived, and the film resurfaced in late 1920s with screenings in New York and Detroit. Now, some listeners may remember that there was also a stage version of Dracula about this time or not long after. Florence Balcom actually gave the rights to the producer of that, Hamilton Deave, who'd been a neighbour of the Stokers in Dublin, I believe. That opened in Derby in 1924, so not long after Nosferatu. That later went to the States and became a huge smash on Broadway and across the whole of the States. And I think really that stage play was the basis for the Bela Lugosi film.
Right.
In 1931. It has more of that feel of a stage play about it than a movie. Ironically enough, Hamilton Deave, although he had the rights to the stage version, never paid Florence Balcom a penny.
Right.
she gave him the rights and he didn't give her anything back.
Oh.
She'd have been better off sticking with Murnau maybe and coming to some sort of arrangement perhaps.
Oh man. After all that. And it's interesting that you mentioned that version because I was reading about this morning. There was a famous version of it in 1995 with Angela Lansbury. So
what was the mind of it, isn't it?
Doesn't it? Doesn't it?
We have another interesting character involved in this film. The man in the title role, one Max Schreck. I mean, even the name itself, Mr. Terror, it sounds almost too good to be true, doesn't it? But that's who he was. That was his name. He was born in Berlin in 1879. He was interested in theatre at a young age, but his father disapproved. So his mother gave him the money to study in secret. And it wasn't until his father died that he could go properly into an acting career. He made his stage debut in Berlin in 1902, and he joined the Max Reinhardt Company. So this is presumably where he would have met Murnau. 1921, he was hired by Prana Films for the Nosferatu role, which, as we know, was their only movie. He actually made a huge amount of films and stage appearances, hundreds, and his career went on well into the 30s until he suffered a fatal heart attack in 1936. Now, by all accounts, he's a bit of an odd character, a very solitary character with what was called an unusual sense of humour, and a person who apparently often spent time walking through forests. Yeah. I'm not quite sure what that says about someone, but it was obviously deemed quite unusual for the time. By all accounts, he was a person who lived in his own world a little bit.
Yeah. You find that a lot with these sort of character actors. I mean, like Patrick Troughton is a great example because he was the same. It's like very private and personal. Didn't do TV and didn't do interviews and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You don't seem to get that now because, I mean, everybody's got a camera shoved in their face 24/7, haven't they? It's like,
TikTok, to the max, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I suppose all this was what sort of led credence to these rumours that Schreck was a vampire himself, which, obviously someone made a very good film about that, which we'll get to. But there was another interesting conspiracy theory, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. There was a conspiracy theory that Schreck never existed, and he was in fact a pseudonym of Alfred Abel. So, but it was complete and total cobblers. But I like that. It was like Max Schreck, man of mystery.
Yeah, yeah, it adds to the mystique, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Alfred Abel was an actor. He was actually in Metropolis. He had quite a big role
Yes.
in Metropolis. He died in 1937. Now, here's an odd thing. He was buried in a cemetery in Berlin, but was later exhumed and cremated due to non-payment of cemetery fees. That's a bit harsh, isn't it?
Isn't it? Oh,
But doesn't that also feed into a conspiracy about him being a vampire? So
doesn't it just?
he is the vampire who is Max Schreck, and then you know, Van Helsing later managed to dig him up and get rid of him forever.
That's brilliant. I didn't know about that. Yeah. Non-payment of taxes. You see,
Well, non-payment of fees. Yeah, I presume your family had to pay a certain amount for maintenance. That's, I guess, how it worked over there.
right.
I don't think that's in operation in this country, is it?
No.
I don't think that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, cemeteries are municipal places, right? So
Yeah.
they're covered by sort of council taxes and stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I also imagine British bureaucracy of sort of like you know what it's like when they're trying to exhume it for like police reasons or whatever like that. The amount of red tape. Could you imagine? there'd be 15 people in a committee. All
Then you'd have a dozen blokes standing around a hole, right, with high vis on and taped off everywhere. Yeah. No digging
yeah,
here.
exactly. It's just like, well, I can't operate that digger. That's your job. Well, I can't operate. you know.
So yeah, already before you get into the movie, there's all this interesting stuff surrounding it, and I'm not sure which feeds which because the film itself is mysterious enough without even all this stuff. But the two combined, you can see how someone would come out with a film called Shadow of the Vampire, can't you? Really?
Yeah.
Just begging for it.
Yeah. Max Schreck was actually married to an actress who was originally known as Fanny Newman, but often credited as Fanny Schreck, which is a tremendous name. You've got yeah.
Oh dear, my word.
Fanny Schreck. I had to get that in.
Absolutely rude not to.
Yeah.
So the film opens in 1838 in Wisborg, where we see Herr Nock, who's kind of the Renfield character, instructing Thomas Hutter, who is the Harker character, is instructing him to go to Transylvania to meet with one Count Orlok. So the broad plot outline is the same as Dracula. Some of the names are changed, and certainly the ending is very much changed. But it's all very familiar to anyone who's read Dracula.
Yeah, something I like to hear because just before this scene, you got this bit with the Hutters, and it was just because it's so different to modern film. I find the way that silent movies are acted, it's all very exaggerated expressions and sort of frenetic movement to get the point across. And you've got this bit where he's gone out and he's picked a flower, and he brings it into her. And she's happy for a second, and then her face drops, and the caption comes up, and I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's why did you kill them, the lovely flowers? I mean, it just kicks it off in such a surreal fashion, doesn't it?
Interesting. And you mentioned the very word there as well, because this is a masterpiece of German Expressionism, right? Which as a form of cinema was really about emotion rather than reality. So these hyper-real emotions, exaggerated emotional displays are very much in keeping with that. And I thought as well, this does link us to Lovecraft, I think, because we get that sense of visual distortion. Reality is not quite Euclidean. You know, if you think about films like Caligari, you get those great sets where everything is at odd angles. Very much that feeling.
Yes.
So this was a movement in Germany at the time. It sort of came to an end when the Nazis came to power, and a lot of the German filmmakers, well, including Murnau, fled to America. But then you see its influence there if you think particularly of your film noir, the Hitchcocks and Orson Welles. You very much see a lot of those same methods used in their films.
Yeah, it's very striking, isn't it? And there's some techniques used that I think were really quite impressive for the time. It's like, well, in a bit, there's a scene with the coachman, sort of when he first arrives, and he comes speeding round, and they overcrank the camera, so they speed up the film. And the way it's done in this gives it a real creepiness. It's incredibly sinister the way it's done. And obviously nowadays it looks kind of daft in color films. It looks kind of silly. I mean, it is best known for things like Benny Hill, isn't it? Because that's how they do the the chase sequences. And loads of sitcoms, like Last of the Summer Wine, the bath going down the hill. They speed up the camera to make it look like it's going faster. But its usage here really gets the sort of hairs on the back of the neck because it's so uncanny valley.
It is. It's just that reality being slightly distorted in some way to get that feeling of unease. We've probably spoken before about this as well, how things in black and white always look more atmospheric anyway, whether that's film or photos.
Yeah.
There's just something about that texture that lends it an air of, I don't know if mystery is the word, or maybe it's a sort of antiquity. It sets it apart from everything being digital and realistic.
Yeah. I mean, this is pre-black and white. I mean, this is just shades of sepia, isn't it?
Yeah.
It reminds me very much in that sort of washed out palette. Reminds me of when you see those brilliant pictures, them brilliant Victorian spirit photography.
Oh, yeah.
Them photos when you got like some woman in morning dress and then somebody looming over their shoulder with a beard like a rose bush. It really brings to mind
people producing ectoplasm and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really striking stuff.
And these scenes set in Transylvania were largely shot in Slovakia. So, we've got realistic landscape, if you like. And then when the Count comes to Germany, a lot of those scenes, well, they were shot either in Berlin studio scenes or in Lübeck and Wiesmann on the Baltic. And of course, there are people who go there today and try and find the locations. I'm sure there's a few clips of that up on YouTube. If I can find any, I'll put the links up below.
Yeah, well, the townhouse that he has when he moves in, those 4 historic buildings, they're still standing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, because I did have a little search earlier. If you type in Nosferatu location, you just get loads of pictures of people standing outside the house pointing up at it, sort of thing,
Sounds like an IBC road trip to me.
Oh, absolutely. Now, something interesting crops up here for me with this scene with Knock, because this is one of the big differences between the source material and Nosferatu, is the sort of origin of the vampire, because it's linked here to the archdemon Belial.
Ah, right.
Yeah, he's a creation of Belial, apparently. And the notes that Knock is reading, because after Hutter leaves, he gets out this wonderful scroll with all these symbols and diagrams and all this kind of stuff on it. That's actually Enochian.
Wow.
The language of the angels, apparently.
Mr. D, I presume.
Indeed. Yeah, it was a language brought to the public attention by John Dee and Edward Kelly, who he was an interesting chap. He was a scryer who mainly practiced catoptromancy, which is the use of mirrors for divination. You know, the whole Bloody Mary thing?
Oh, yeah.
That's catoptromancy.
Right.
Using a mirror to, that scrying mirrors and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so Kelly was a bit of an interesting chap. But Enochian, Dee's journals referred to the language as celestial speech, first language of God Christ, holy language, or language of angels. And according to the angels, it was used by Adam in paradise to name all things. And the term Enochian comes from Dee's assertion that the biblical patriarch Enoch had been the last human before Dee and Kelly to know the language.
Ah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there you go. It's I like the usage of it there. And obviously you get it crop up in a load of those, them sort of satanic films.
And the Ninth Gate and all those sort of things. And
All that kind of stuff. Yeah. Now, Dee and Kelly, they said the reception started on March the 26th, 1583, when Kelly reported visions in the crystal of a 21-lettered alphabet. A few days later, he started receiving what became the book Liber Leogaeth. I probably said that completely wrong, but it means Book of Speech from God. The book consists of 49 great letter tables, or squares made of 49 by 49 letters. However, each table has a front and a back side, making 98 tables of 49 by 49 letters altogether. Dee and Kelly said the angels never translated the text in this book. So, yeah, I'd like whatever they'd been on, I want it.
Yeah, it's very interesting stuff, isn't it? And you can actually see a lot of Dee's equipment at the British Museum, such as his scry mirror and various other objects.
Nice.
In fact, I did an Innsmouth excursion down there a little while ago, so I'll pop a link to that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, of course, Belial is one of the most important demons in the sort of pantheon, if you could call them that. And I found a lovely quote here. It's actually from Milton's Paradise Lost, Book 1. Belial came last, than whom a spirit more lewd fell not from heaven, or more gross to love. Vice for itself, to him no temple stood, or altar smoked, yet who more oft than he in temples and altars, when the priest turns atheist, as did Eli's sons, who'd filled with lust and violence the house of God. So, yeah.
Very nice. So this is an interesting origin for the vampire, isn't it? Because I can't remember exactly what the origin was given in Dracula, but obviously there's this association with Vlad Tepes, the Dragon Order, that kind of stuff. So I'm guessing that was largely the origin. I don't know. Was the Coppola film accurate for the origin of that we see at the start? It's been a long time since I read Dracula.
Yeah, I think so. I don't recall lots of goths throwing a wobbler about it at the time, so I assume it was.
It was basically a renunciation of God, wasn't it? And therefore you get cursed to be this immortal being.
Yeah, because it's essentially an incubus, isn't it? The whole vampirism thing.
Yeah, well, again, there's so many different versions, right? We mentioned the Slavic connection there, but, there are ancient Greek vampires, Chinese vampires we've spoken about before. I suspect each comes with its own origin story.
Yeah. Of course, there's Colin Robinson's. We all know one of them.
What are you doing, Colin Robinson?
Yeah.
So again, to me, this is another layer of mystery added into this film, if you like, these occult connections. And they may even go far deeper than we can mention here, But then on top of that, we have this incredible performance from Schreck and this incredible appearance. I don't think that there's been such an odd-looking vampire or pretty much anything else, really, since. I mean, that's 100 years ago, but that is still such a striking image and such a striking performance.
Yeah, it's so well done. And I think the filming techniques really add to it because, again, you get they muck around with the camera speed to give him a sort of jerkiness of movement. And he's got that, that posture with his hands out and the way he creeps. And every other step will be slightly sped up, if you notice. So it gives him a sort of very jarring gait, which is immensely creepy. So when he comes up to Harker's there at the table with all the documents, and he cuts his finger, and he sort of zooms in, it's just like, oh.
Which is the nice contrast, right? Because the rest of the time is almost static or very slow. So this, for me, is where you get the parallels with the spider that just sits patiently and waits, and then boom, it pounces. But there's also something of the rat about him, something maybe slightly bat-like, and then you have like the idea of a tick feeding on your blood as well.
Yes.
It's a great combination of all these attributes.
Yeah, and that ties in later with the rats and, the plague and all that kind of stuff, which you've got to think that back then that was playing in real fears, because like the trenches and things like that were full of the rats. You know, there would have been a major rat problem around that time.
And we're not far out of the great Spanish flu epidemic as well, right?
Absolutely.
Which killed millions. So this idea of well, obviously you got the medieval plagues in Europe, but this was a modern plague. So yeah, very much touching on real fears at the time.
Yeah. I think something else that really adds to it, I mean, because the version I watched was the Blu-ray, the reconstructed Blu-ray version, which came out about 6 years ago, something like that. And it's got like some of the plates that had been missing for a long time reinserted into it. And it had a recreation of the original score. Now, it really adds so much to it, because you've got the beginning where they're picking the flowers and doing the husbandy wifey thing. It's this jaunty. It's almost like Vivaldi's Four Seasons, right? And then when Knock reads that thing, and you cut to the scene of the wife not being happy about him going away, the music changes. And it becomes this drone that then carries on for the bulk of the movie. And it just changes the entire tone. It's one of the best uses of a score to me. And the original score was composed by Hans Erdmann and performed by an orchestra at the film's Berlin premiere. However, most of the score has been lost. And what remains is only a partial adapted suite. And obviously, so yeah, they put together this bits and just sort of adapted it. And but throughout the history of the screenings, there's been so many different versions and different soundtracks. Now, probably the best known would be James Bernard's soundtrack, as he was the composer for many of the Hammer films of the late 50s and 60s. So he did the score that was released in 1997 by Silver Screen Records.
Right.
So, yeah, this version that I've got was a version of Erdmann's score reconstructed by musicologists and composers Gillian Anderson and James Kessler, which was first done in 1995.
Right.
Now, there's one that I remember seeing back in the day.
I know what you're going to say.
Yes, it was done by some German musician, and it was basically an industrial hellscape. And I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I do remember that one. Yeah,
it was absolutely brilliant. Lots of like harsh scrapings of metal and, hissing like machinery. And it was just really weird, but worked.
I wonder what version I saw then, because this would have been probably mid to late 80s. I saw a screening of the film at the South Bank with a live orchestra.
That'll probably be the Bernard score then.
Right.
Because it wasn't until 95 that they resurrected the original score. So it probably would have been the Hammer one.
Yeah. Oh, it was very good seeing it with a live orchestra.
Yeah.
And of course, with a silent movie, the music is even more important, right?
Oh, yeah.
So following our scenes in Transylvania, we get the sea voyage, the Demeter. Speaking of which, I recently watched The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which was enjoyable. Very enjoyable film. Very, very nicely done, I thought.
I haven't seen it yet. I've still not got round to it. Is it what people said? It's basically Alien on a boat.
I suppose, yeah, it is that. And there is one major flaw with it, in that this boat has got, half a dozen huge boxes on it. They eventually work out that something is coming out of the boxes and killing the crew, at which point the captain lashes himself to the wheel and all the rest of it. And you think, why don't they get all the boxes up on deck and open them to the sunlight? Because they've established that is what kills, So a little bit of a flaw in the plot there, unless I miss something. But yeah, visually and acting wise, yeah, it's well worth a watch. And the creature is very good.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the coffins. Just before you get the Demeter scenes, you've got the classic shot, haven't you, of when Hutter fails his sand roll.
Yeah.
because he's having a mooch around. Things have been going wrong. Everything's been a bit weird and a bit off, and he keeps waking up with these punctures on his neck. So he's creeped out, and he'd had that thing the night before with his bloody finger and the portrait of the wife. You know the classic story. Yeah, and he's groggy as hell because he's been fed on again, and he's having a wander about, and he finds the coffin. And it's just such a wonderful shot, isn't it, of Schreck in that coffin?
Yeah, the pose, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know, even if you've never seen it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, I think that's why people have said this really set the template, not only for vampire films, but for a lot of horror films to come.
Oh, yeah. And the entirety of the goth scene. I mean, I've been mentally going through like records because I can see on my vinyl here. I'm going through. Oh yeah, they do that pose. Oh yeah, the drummer does the pose in the sleeve on that one. Yeah, but famously Dave Vanian's done it, hasn't he?
Yes, yeah, very nice. They look cool, didn't they? Yeah, no one's done Max Schreck is dead, have they? Though it was always Bella.
Yeah. Ooh, maybe I'll write one.
Yeah, well, perhaps because he isn't dead. There you go. Max Schreck isn't dead. You could start something new.
Yeah.
And then it's on the Demeter, we get the second iconic shot from the coffin, right, with just that standing up, which I believe was done with a plank and a few burly guys hauling him up.
Yes.
But that still looks so powerful today, that shot.
Again, yeah, because again they overcrank the camera just ever so slightly to give it that weird off kilter. Because it doesn't look like somebody's basically just hoisted him up with a plank, because it's such a weird pace that it comes up at.
Yeah.
It amazes me what you can do with such limited technology. I mean, that's why I was always impressed by like 60s sci-fi and stuff like that, and the 50s stuff, and some of the B movies. People take the piss out of it now, but if you think about it in the context of the time it was made, it's really impressive.
Well, I think this comes out of the theatre, right? I mean, so much of those early silent movies were still theatrical productions in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
Just due to the limits of filming. I mean, how much could they film at a time? Was it a couple of minutes or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. But your practical effects are all bought out of stagecraft. And I know I've seen things, I'm sure you have, where they can create an atmosphere on stage with just a few bits of paper and, some lighting and all the rest. One of the best examples I saw was we saw a stage version of The Hobbit, and they're in Mirkwood. So you get your normal stage trees, but then they had like a spider puppet slowly lowers down from above.
Oh, nice.
And with the lighting and everything else, it just worked really well. I mean, if you looked at it in daylight, right, it's probably a cushion with a couple of things sewn onto it. But given the staging, it works really well. So, yeah, I think it just shows a great inventiveness. And also it's something that stimulates your imagination more than seeing a CGI, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the techniques come out of that, like you say, out of the Victorian theatre. Things like the phantasmagoria, the magic lanterns and Pepper's ghost, the use of glass shots and all that. And they still look really impressive to this day. It's like I think one of the most terrifying experiences I've had in my life was going to see the stage show of The Woman in Black.
Oh, yes, of course.
Oh, my word. And that's essentially one guy just stood there for the entirety of the thing, going through various scenes.
Yeah.
But the atmosphere and the limited but impressive use of effects.
Yeah. Because that's all basically down to lighting, isn't it? Because they're not even the one I saw. They had a trunk as a prop.
That's it. Yeah, there's just a trunk. Yeah,
it's doubled as that's a sofa and that's the horse and cart.
Oh yeah, that's basically it. Yeah,
yeah. The rest is achieved by lighting and sound effects.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we get the arrival in Germany, and that's where we get this idea of this creature bringing the plague with him in the form of all his rats. And we get the coffin carrying, don't we?
Yeah, and again, it's sped up, so it just looks so weird going through the street. I love them shots, man. I really do. I think they're absolutely tremendous. Because I haven't watched this for a long time, and I'd forgotten just how effective it is. Because I did that thing, to do it properly. I sat there with my headphones on, turned the lights off, sat in the dark and watched it, and just chills in some of these scenes.
And one thing I like in this as well is when we get him as the shadow. The scene at the end where the hand coming up to clutch the heart, but it's all just a shadow. But she's reacting as though it's physical, because we don't really get any transformations as such into bats or wolves or fog. There's none of that. I suppose that was something that would be very difficult to do with the technology then, but it's done by implication. It is almost a phantom at times.
Yeah. Again, really effective scenes. Something I observed at this point, because while the plague's kicking off and all that, Nock escapes. He's over the moon that his master's arrived and all this, and there's this whole chase scene because he's strangled the custodian, made his escape, and he's being chased through the streets and out into the countryside. And you've got this again, just mind-meltingly surreal scenes, because you've got this basically pitchfork carrying mob sort of hurtling through this field, and there's a scarecrow, and because they can't find Nock, they take it upon themselves to tear this scarecrow apart, and they basically quarter it, don't they? And it's and then my brain sort of went, well, that had to have influenced Richard O'Brien, because you've got this bit with Nock, because he's got the hair and the bushy eyebrows in this, and he's hiding behind a tree stump. And as he comes out, he's got this expression, this gleeful, manic expression. It was sort of like, it's riffraff.
Yes, I never thought of that. Yeah. But that's the interesting thing with that Nock character. He's quite jolly, isn't he? But in a very chilling, total psychopath kind of way.
Well, he's manic, isn't he? It's mania. You got the classic Renfield scenes of him eating bugs and things, and him getting really excited because there's a big fat juicy spider. And the guards are like, "I'm not getting you the spider."
I think this master thing is interesting as well in light of the occult connections, because obviously there's that idea of his account. He is your lord and master. But again, I wonder if there's a deeper association there. Is Orlok perhaps some sort of higher level in a particular occult order or something like that?
I would have said so, yes, because of the use of the Enochian and all that kind of stuff. I would have probably said yes to my mind, because they've added these sort of very strong and very specific occult things. So he'd basically be the master, or
the head of the order sort of thing.
Yeah.
So then you speculate, is this some sort of deal he made with Belial in order to be given eternal life or become immortal? But part of the twist of that, because it's never a straight thing, right?
Oh no,
is you're immortal, but you turned into a bloodsucker.
Always read the small print when making a deal with the devil, right?
Trouble is, it's always in Latin.
That's the problem, isn't it?
And we mentioned at the start that the ending is changed quite considerably. I suppose maybe from budgetary reasons, or again, it's not practical. But also, we don't really have many characters in this, do we? We've not got the full spread of vampire hunters.
No, you basically got Professor Bulbar, who's the Van Helsing character. And he's kind of not in it very much, is he? He's sort of at the university telling people about parasites and all this kind of stuff. And then he sort of comes in more at the end. And he's kind of got a much more passive role in this.
Yeah, and we don't get anything like Lucy being turned into the vampire or any of that stuff. Again, but the size of the cast perhaps limits that. So what we get here is, rather than the vampire hunting scene and the big stakeout at the end,
oh dear,
it's really down to Ellen, played by Greta Schroeder, to trap Nosferatu, to hold him there until the sun rises.
Yeah, and you may have heard me sniggering to myself a minute ago. It's because of my notes. I do this to myself all the time, because the way it plays out with the shadow scene, The shadow grabs a tit. Hutter grabs a tit. Shadow grabs a tit again. That's kind of how it looks to my brain. It's obviously he's grabbing the heart, obviously, but that's,
Have you ever thought of a career in directing or screenwriting? But yeah, that's basically the ending. She holds him there at the cost of her own life. The cock crows, the sun comes up, and we get the fade away, which again, that's become a sort of a trope, isn't it, in a lot of vampire films?
Yes. I love his expression when he realizes the sun's up. It's a proper shit expression, isn't it? His face falls.
Yeah.
It's incredibly well done considering there's no dialogue or anything. There's no like, oh no, the sun, rah. It's like, bollocks. To be able to convey that just through your eyes pretty much is really impressive work.
Yeah, yeah. And again, imagine the annoyance of having bargained for eternal life and sold your soul, and you get caught out like that. That seems like it's his first visit back to civilization as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Then I wonder if there's an element of, like we get in some of the later films, of a man out of his place, out of his time, is not quite sure how to react or interact with modern society.
Well, you do get that impression just in the way he lives, don't you? Like around the castle and all that kind of stuff. It is very much last century, even to when it was made, you know.
So yeah, a classic as it was, of course, because of that litigation and because of most of the prints being destroyed, it wasn't really very widely viewed in its day. And it's only really as we got into the 20s and 30s when it was rediscovered and became something of a cult classic. I feel like its stature has grown over the years, almost like a vampire in a way. The older it's got, the better it's become.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And do you know what I actually think one of the big reasons behind that is? MTV. How many goth and metal bands in the 80s and 90s used, because it was no copyright, how many of them used clips and scenes and things in their music videos, or live bands behind them on the stage and things like that?
Very true, very true. I remember seeing it on the old Grey Whistle test at one time. I can't remember what the band was. They used to have those bits where they'd show an old film to a sort of modern band.
Yes.
If they couldn't get him in a studio. I'm sure I saw it on there at one point as well. Yeah. And it is such a striking visual image. I mean, I had that poster years back. You know?
Oh, yeah.
I've still got the T-shirt somewhere with Nosferatu on. It is just so iconic. And as I said before, I don't think that's been equaled by any horror film monster or creature since, you know, even Cthulhu himself.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's just how striking the look is. Because, I mean, that's something they got right to a lesser degree, but they got right in the remake, right? The 70s one.
Yes. Well, that brings us neatly to 1979 and the Werner Herzog version, Nosferatu the Vampire, starring Klaus Kinski in the title role. Now, these two, there's quite a history and backstory there that we don't really have time to go into, but I think it's fair to say they don't really get on very well.
No.
In fact, I'm not sure that Klaus Kinski gets on with anyone very well, as we'll find out later. Quite a dark character.
Yeah.
So this was a colour remake, of course. This was filmed in Delft, and it very much has the feel of the original in terms of the background and the setting. In fact, Herzog said he chose Delft because it looks like a theatre.
Ah.
And he also described Nosferatu the original as the most important German film ever.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Herzog originally intended to film in Transylvania, but Ceausescu's regime would not allow it.
Ah, right.
Yeah. Due to basically relations between the character of Count Dracula and Vlad the Impaler. That was reasons Ceausescu basically said no.
Right.
So there you go. Yeah.
And Herzog is a very interesting director. And one quote he said about this film, it was talking about it, how it was made. And he said, my films come from pain.
Yeah, he's basically a bit of a nutcase, really, from what I can gather. I mean, I love this story here because you mentioned before we started about the opening sequence, right?
Ah, yes, yeah, that is a great opening sequence.
Yeah, now he filmed the mummies of Guanajuato in Guanajuato, Mexico. It's a museum, basically, where a large number of naturally mummified bodies of the victims of the 1833 cholera epidemic are on public display. Now, Herzog had been there while visiting in the 60s. And when he wanted to do the movie, he returned. And do you know what he did? On his return, he took the corpses out of the glass cases that they were normally stored in, propped them against the wall, and arranged them in sequence, running roughly from childhood to old age.
Grief. My God, did he have permission to do this, or did he just rock up one day and just start?
I don't know. I don't think he'd care. You know, he was just like, oh, they're not in the right order. I'm going to get all these bodies out and prop them up against the wall.
Wow. I mean, it is a very striking opening, isn't it? That
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so we can see that idea about pain, and even in the character here, because I suppose this being a modern film, we get more interaction with Nosferatu, and it's almost like he's seeking death. You know, it's almost like he's fed up of his existence and he's seeking death.
Yeah, I can see that.
In terms of the look of the film as well, there's something else interesting. We go from German Expressionism to German Romanticism, because Herzog was very influenced by German Romanticism. This is from the early 19th century, and in particular the work of an artist called Caspar David Friedrich, who did these landscapes of German mountains with mist and sunrises and everything else. And you can actually see, you can put a scene side by side with one of the paintings.
Nice.
And they're virtual exact copies. So I thought that was interesting. We go from this expressionism to romanticism.
Oh, that's amazing.
Perhaps that's a sign of the times. It's 79, we're at the birth of a goth.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Is it there? That is actually very interesting, isn't it? But if you see that, when you watch it, you can tell that it is, you know, that was the template for most goth music videos from that point on, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Especially those shots, the famous shots where he's just sitting on the bench, right, and the mist and all that.
So I think this follows more the plot of the original film rather than Dracula, though it does change one or two little things again. We still get the idea of the rats. There's a lot more rats in this one. There's huge amounts of rats.
Yeah.
And this plague that comes into town. And there's weird things like almost a feast going on amidst the horror of the plague. That almost goes back to sort of medieval settings for me.
Yeah. It's interesting you brought up the rats, because there's actually a controversy about the film because of the rats. Dutch behavioral biologist Martin Ter Hart was hired by Herzog for his expertise with lab rats. He revealed that after witnessing the inhumane the rats were treated, he no longer wished to cooperate.
Wow.
Apparently the traveling conditions were so poor that the rats, which were imported from Hungary, had started to eat each other upon arrival.
Oh, that's awful.
I know, it's really, really sad. So, yeah, so there you go.
I mean, I know people today, you hear that whole thing, oh, health and safety's gone mad. But when you hear stuff like that, you think, well, there's a reason, isn't there? You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
You look at the way horses used to be treated when they were filming westerns and stuff. It's appalling.
Oh no, it really was. Yeah.
And then we come to Klaus Kinski. So he shaved his head for the part. He really didn't enjoy having the makeup put on. They really had to persuade him to do that. This is a sign of things to come, as we'll find out in a moment. But he does bring a lot to the role, I think. It's not quite a Max Schreck, but I think he's your next best thing.
He does a damn good job, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of stillness about him and staring. The scene where Harker turns up first at the castle and he's eating, or they're looking at the contracts, and Nosferatu is just sat there staring at him. It's really uncomfortable.
It is really unnerving, isn't it? It's, yeah. See, I think most people have had that situation. You meet that usually on a bus. Somebody comes and sits next to you or opposite you,
Mm.
and they don't blink. It's just like fuck off. You know?
And the Van Helsing character in this is quite a skeptic, actually. He's not really into all this superstitious stuff at all. He's a
Yeah, something I liked about both versions, but I think it was probably better done in the original. Is again something we've discussed a lot about what I like to call yokel knowledge, not local knowledge, yokel knowledge. It's these old rustic chaps who know more that's going on, right? Because you got the bit where they're taking Hutter up to the castle, and he's, I'm not going any further. Off you pop.
Yeah.
And all that. And you got some great scenes in both of them of this, you know, when he stays at the inn.
Yeah, and I wondered if this one, the Nosferatu character, seems a little more Byronic than Schreck is inhuman, right? You can't, you don't want to empathize with him at all, really. I don't think. And again, maybe that's just the simple fact of having dialogue going on, and you get more exposition of character come across, perhaps.
Yeah, that actually brings to mind, you know, Vampire the Masquerade, because Schreck is definitely a gangrel, right?
Yeah.
The bestial, inhuman, and then, you know, this version is the more, like you say, the more Byronic, but that fits in with the romanticism thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, and more with the original character, right? Or Stoker's Dracula, who's the nobleman and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
And then the ending, we have another twist in this version because, yes, we get the demise of Nosferatu, apparently, but Jonathan Harker becomes the vampire.
Yes. It's a nice touch, isn't it? Yeah.
So in some ways, that's just that's an even bleaker ending, really, isn't it? Because you can't destroy the evil. It just shifts, moves across a bit and continues.
Yeah. Well, that fits in with the whole metaphors of plague and things like that, doesn't it? You know, it's
yeah, the vampire is a virus that's carried and spread rather than being an individual. Yeah. And we mentioned the soundtrack for the original film. The soundtrack for this was supplied by Popol Vuh, or a sort of a German prog krautrock band. So again, that gives it quite an interesting twist as well, I think.
I love the score personally. I always loved the score of that, but then again, I'm a big fan of things like Tangerine Dream, so you know, I'm gonna be a fan of it, right? Now it's interesting because this film was made in 1979, and also in 1979 there was I guess you could say inspired by Hugh Cornwell from the Stranglers did his first solo album in 1979, which went by the name of Nosferatu. Now, side A of the vinyl, Hugh wrote those songs and put them together as portions or episodes of an imaginary film. So that was him scoring his version of Nosferatu.
Right.
Which is really cool. So it's one of those records that it doesn't work if you take a track here, a track there. You need to listen to side A in order to get the full effect of it.
Do you remember those good old days when you sat and listened to an album, and an album was built and put together in a specific running order?
Oh, yeah. And this is one of a really great use of it. I've always loved this album. It's the one that the single off it was the cover of Cream's White Room.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, brilliant album. Another prog band called Art Zoid, who I've never heard of.
No, me neither.
No, they did a version. They did an album called Nosferatu in 1989. So there you go. And there was also an operatic version of Nosferatu composed by Alva Henderson in 2004 with a libretto by Dana Groyer. So, yeah, which is it. I was thinking when I was watching it and we were talking about it, that the Expressionism thing, a lot of the movements and things like that, it is like opera without the voice, isn't it?
Well, that's true. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
So I could see how an opera would work.
Yeah. And I can see that if you think of things like stage productions like The Black Rider, which involved Tom Waits and Robert Wilson, I think. I think William Burroughs was involved in that as well.
He was.
Yeah, the way that was staged and the way the characters moved. Well, I mean, that was taken directly from German Expressionism, really, the whole atmosphere of it. So it's interesting how these things circle around from stage to screen to music back to stage again, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's very strange indeed.
So that brings us to the sequel to Herzog's 79 film, because in 1988, we get Vampire in Venice. And I think that may have gone under other names as well. This was the brainchild, if I can put it that way, of Augusto Caminito, and Klaus Kinski returns for the role. Interestingly enough, though, Kinski is uncredited in the final movie.
Really?
Yes. You'll find out why in a moment.
Oh, here we go.
From the start, this was a total mess. Caminito had a particular director in mind, so he signed him up and then dropped him. There were issues. Second director came in, started rewriting the script. Caminito didn't like that, dropped him, got the third director in. So already we're on 3 directors and we've not even started yet.
Oh, dear.
Then you add Klaus Kinski into the mix. He refused to shave his head this time. He refused to wear fangs, and he refused to have much makeup put on. Absolutely put his foot down. Not only that, but he acted up so badly that at one point the whole crew walked off the set.
Bloody hell.
Until he apologized. Now, when I say acting badly, you might think, oh, he's being a diva and everything else. Well, that, but he was also accused of sexually assaulting his female co-stars. Sometimes during the actual scene, if you see the film, there is a certain amount of nudity in it. And
oh, yeah, of course there is. Yeah.
And, well, yeah, I'll say no more than that.
Bloody hell.
So you've got all that going on. Kinski also demanded his own scenes. He'd just start rewriting the script himself, which meant that there somewhere exists 10 hours of footage of Kinski walking around Venice.
10 hours?
10 hours.
Oh, my God. That's absolute... that's mental, isn't it?
So they filmed for 6 weeks, and it wasn't finished, but Caminito decided, I've had enough. He pulled the plug on it. So what they had over that 6 weeks, they sort of cobbled together, and that premiered at the Venice Film Festival in September 1988. Now, I think there's good things and bad things about this film. I'll say the good things first, because it's a vampire in Venice. I mean, as a setting, it doesn't get any better. I've only visited Venice once. It was a half-a-day trip, but it's a place I'd love to go back to. And of course, seeing it in all the mist and the morning fogs and everything else, tremendously atmospheric.
You've got to wonder if whoever wrote the Doctor Who Matt Smith episode Vampires in Venice has seen this movie, haven't you, really?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because I don't think it was on wide release.
No. Well, I only recently heard about it because Joel from Byronic Sex and Exile was waffling on about it on his Facebook page. That was the first time I'd heard of it.
Yeah, exactly. Same for me. I mean, if it's not on our radar, right, then it's got to be
it's
got to be pretty well tucked away. Well, probably with good reason, as it turns out, for all of these things. So yeah, it looks fantastic. There's the costumes are great. Obviously, there's scenes with the masked revelers going on. Look fantastic. The interior shots. I mean, it's amazing buildings as well. It's like your sitting room is like a sort of Michelangelo painting, you know. There's just artwork and everything everywhere. And the use of shadows is great as well. He gets that right. The bad parts of it, the sound is absolutely awful. Now, this might be because I watched it on YouTube, but I suspect not, having seen some other Italian films with the same thing. It's very jarring. The levels are all over the place. You get loud music and then it suddenly stops and cuts into another scene.
Yes.
You know, it's not easy on the ear, any of it, but not in an intentional way. It's just crap mixing.
Yeah, you often find that because obviously some of the actors will be speaking English, and some of them will be speaking Italian. So you always find, because that was one of my complaints with a lot of Fulci's films, and people like that, is that you'll get like the natural English stuff on one level, and then the dubbing is way high.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to it on headphones, it makes your ears bleed.
Yeah. And it's obviously recorded somewhere else. They make no attempt to blend it in. So yeah, it's very jarring. That.
Yeah.
So I would say if you want to watch it, and I'll put the link up because it's on YouTube, then look at it from a visual perspective and turn the sound down. To be honest, you don't really need to know what the plot is anyway. We've got Christopher Plummer in this as the vampire hunter. We've got Donald Pleasance as the local priest.
Nice.
So a good cast, and they all do solid work.
Yeah.
So all that is good, but the plot, as you can imagine, with the way this was filmed and thrown together, it's all over the place. You haven't got a clue half the time what's going on. There's a rough thread that runs throughout, I suppose, but you sort of lose interest after a while. So the reviews of it were things like confusing and scattershot. And Kim Newman, the writer Kim Newman, came up with a nice one. A strangely beautiful mess.
Nice.
I get totally what it means because it looks stunning. And if you'd have had a plot that matched the look of it, you would have had a fantastic film there. Kinski, I mean, he does okay. I mean, it's hard to ignore those accusations and everything.
Yeah.
But it's not the same as the bald Nosferatu. He does move nicely. He's got that very slow, almost reptilian or spider-like movement again. But I have to say, a lot of the time, with his hair and his look and his eye makeup, I thought it was Genesis Peorage. It really did look like him at times.
Oh, I expect him to go, hamburger lady.
God star.
Yeah.
That's the, musician, performance artist.
Yes.
Artist. The lead singer of Psychic TV for many years. And
Throbbing Gristle.
Throbbing Gristle, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit difficult for me to get over that as well. So I would say, as a curiosity, it's on YouTube. It's not going to cost you anything. Have a look, but don't expect too much.
It sounds like a 5-pinter to me.
Yes.
We discussed before my film ranking scale. It's on how many pints you need to fully appreciate it. It sounds like a 5-pinter to me.
So we have alluded to this already, but there was a film made in the year 2000 that was a film about the film, really, wasn't it?
I loved this movie.
Yeah.
It was one of my favourite films of the era. I really, really liked this movie.
Yes, Shadow of the Vampire, the year 2000, directed by E. Elias Merhicker, with John Malkovich playing Murnau and William Dafoe as Max Schreck, not as Nosferatu, as Max Schreck.
Yes.
And we also get Eddie Izzard in this, who plays the Hutter Parker character. In effect, it is an actor playing an actor. He's playing the part of Gustang von Wandsheim, who was the original Hutter.
Yeah. It's interesting because he's actually really good casting.
Looks like him, doesn't he?
He does look like him. Yeah, he's got the same eyes. Them slightly protuberant, wild eyes. He's spot on casting for it.
So, yeah, this is basically a film about Murnau making Nosferatu, and the twist is Nosferatu is a real vampire. And this is a great turn by William Dafoe, I think.
Yeah, he nails it. He absolutely nails it.
And I think another thing that makes this film so good is there's a sort of vein of dark humour running through it, if you'll excuse the vain pun. I got one in there I didn't even mean to.
I don't even notice now. I'm so used to your god-awful puns that I don't even notice them.
Oh, imagine my poor wife, what she has to put up with. It's just constant punishment, really.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
And I think my favourite scene is there's a moment when Murnau realises that he's dealing with a real vampire. I think he pushes him away because Max Schreck, or as he looks in the film, is a tall but scrawny, skinny sort of thing, really. And he just pushes him away. And he does that sit-up and just pushes Murnau back with absolutely no effort at all. And the face and the eyes just change. And it's, oh, shit.
It's a brilliance, yeah.
It is.
Yeah. You got that. There's a scene where they're out in the courtyard and there's wind blowing and you got the shadow and stuff. And I thought that's always stuck in my mind. I was just like, Ooh, it's just sort of, yeah, you can sort of blink and miss a lot of it, which I thought was really well done. It's all in the background, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it definitely repays repeat viewing. And yeah, I think we've watched this 2 or 3 times. Oh, Udo Kier pops up as well, doesn't he, as the assistant? I mean, it is always worth watching, old Udo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and just to bring us full circle, Mr. Defoe is also appearing in the remake, which is coming out in a couple of weeks' time as we record this. What role is he playing in that?
He's playing he's playing the Van Helsing role. Yeah. Professor Albin Eberhard von Franz.
Von Franz. That's a nice turnaround, isn't it? You go from playing the Nosferatu to the Van Helsing.
Yeah.
That's both sides of the coin.
It's an interesting cast because you got Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok. I think he's good casting because if you've seen him as Pennywise in the It reboots, you can see it. You know, he's got that similar sort of look to him. The prominent cheekbones, the big eyes. I think he can nail that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see. As I say, the trailers I've seen so far have been very good, and I'm pleased to see that they've gone with that look as well, that classic look.
Yeah, because we also mentioned earlier that there was one that came out in 2023. That was directed by David Lee Fisher and was actually done through a Kickstarter. Now, how they did it, they basically green screened it and used the settings and things from the original movie and put the characters over it. So it looks quite striking. I haven't seen it, so I can't really comment whether it's any good either way. Now, the role of Orlok in that is taken by Doug Jones, who is probably best known as the amphibian man in The Shape of Water and the faun in Pan's Labyrinth.
Ah, that's the guy who's got that really odd build and the way of moving, isn't it?
That's the one, yes.
Is he like a dancer originally, perhaps, or something like that?
Yes, he was. He was.
Oh,
yes.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a mime artist as well.
Right.
Yeah. He's very, very strange movements and things like that. He was also in Return of the Living Dead, one of those as one of the zombies, one of his early roles.
Well, doesn't that bring it full circle again? Because we go from Max Schreck, who was a stage actor and then was acting in silent films, so in effect was a mime, all the way back round to a mime artist playing that role again.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, he was also Abe Sapien in the Hellboy movies. So
yeah. That's a good name, isn't it?
So I think he's great casting.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to give it a go because, it does look interesting.
And we should mention in closing that the character of Max Schreck has actually appeared in a couple of other things as well. I mean, we've got Shadow of the Vampire there. Of course, we've also got Tim Burton's Batman Returns.
Yes. With
the character played by Christopher Walken.
Indeed. And yes, the SpongeBob SquarePants. Count Orlok is a recurring character in SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yes, and it gets better. It gets better because he's the night shift manager.
Yes.
At the Krusty Krab restaurant.
Indeed, the Krusty Krab.
That's spelt with a K.
Yes.
Each of those.
I'm going to have to watch that episode. It's called Graveyard Shift, the main one.
Nice.
Apparently, there's lots of flickering lights and weird stuff going on, and it turns out it's all Count Orlok's fault.
Oh, marvelous. I wonder if the Krusty Krab, they've got a branch here in Innsmouth. Surely they must have.
Oh, they must, yeah. If they haven't already, they should.
Speaking of which, I think I can hear the bus pulling up outside. So it's time for us to depart. Time for us to drive off before the sun goes down, before the moon rises, and before strange shadows are seen flitting across the wall. Do you see how I got a plug in there for our other podcast?
I did. Yeah, very well done. Yeah, well done. Yeah.
Strange Shadows, the Clark Ashton Smith podcast.
Yeah, indeed.
There we go. So thanks very much for joining us. And do let us know if you see the new Nosferatu film before we do. Do write in and tell us what you think about it. No doubt we shall return and have a chat about that at some point in the new year. But before then, we have the festive season coming up. The festival is almost upon us. And I believe we've got something of a festive story we're covering next time, sir.
Indeed, yeah. We're going to get all sort of tinsely here. We're going to look at Willem Hopfrog Pugmire's Oh Christmas Tree, which is actually the first Sesqua Valley story he ever wrote.
Yes, I look forward to reading that. So we hope you can join us next time.
Yeah.
As always, thanks to all our patrons and subscribers and everyone who sent us in some messages. We'll be reviewing the mailbag next time as well and reading out some of your latest messages. Of course, if you'd like to join our band of patrons in supporting the show, do check out the Patreon page. And I'm not sure that there might be a Christmas edition of Innsmouth News in the offing, so keep an eye out for that if you're a patron. And of course, you get access to all our bonus content as well for this and for Strange Shadows. We are going to be putting out some readings over Christmas, so we'll be taking a short break. And in the new year, we'll be returning with some bonus episodes. We'll be continuing our look at the fungi from Yuggoth Sonnet Cycle, and we'll be delving into some Smithian letters or poetry, perhaps, I would imagine as well.
Oh, yes. I think it'd be rude not to, really.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening today. With that, it's goodbye from me, Rob Python.
And it's goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.